Hello and welcome to Candid Conversation. Our guest this week is Dr. Arvind Panagadia. He needs no introduction, but for the uninitiated, I would say that he is the Vice Chairman of Niti Aayog and an eminent economist. Today we will talk to him about the challenges before Niti Aayog and the Indian economy. Welcome, Dr. Panagadia, to
Pleasure to be here.
Candid Conversation. It's been nearly 9 to 10 months since Niti Aayog was formed.
Right.
What is it that the Planning Commission was doing earlier, which Niti Aayog is not doing today?
Planning Commission's main mandate was to do 5-year plans, and operationally, of course, Planning Commission also used to channel lots of funds to the states. While we are still doing the midterm appraisal of the 12th 5-year plan, that is only one of many things that we are currently doing. And at the same time, we are not dispersing funds to the states in the way the Planning Commission was doing.
Since that fund disbursal function is not there anymore with the body which has replaced the Planning Commission, has the bargaining power of Niti Aayog reduced vis-a-vis states compared to what Planning Commission had?
Well, I would put it a little differently. That the relationship under the erstwhile Planning Commission was a bit of an unequal one with the states. The Planning Commission was the giver of the funds, states were recipients. So you saw the states actually lining up at the Planning Commission offices. Today we don't disperse the money, and so our relationship certainly is much more equal, and I'm personally very pleased with that. This also means that we must earn our living with the states by supporting them in ways other than doling out money.
So it's a harder job compared to what the Planning Commission was doing vis-a-vis coordination with states and getting them on board?
At one level it's a harder job, but at another level it's more satisfying too.
How does the Planning Commission today do its daily interaction with various ministries and departments of the union government? Because earlier there was a mechanism of daily interaction between the Planning Commission and these union government departments and ministries. How does the interaction take place today?
So there are different ways, at different levels at which interactions take place. We still support a lot of the analysis of the ministries. So issues as they arise in the ministries, many of those get sent to us. Our staff analyzes, provides inputs. Most of the cabinet notes do come to us for comments. We do that. I serve on many of the committees, ministerial committees, which again are formed periodically. And so I provide inputs that way. We are also actually asked to formulate policies. So as an example, in the area of energy, we got multiple ministries. You got coal and power, you got oil and gas, you got nuclear, renewable energy. So multiple ministries. So no single ministry out of those can really be well placed to do the national energy policy. So we are writing the national energy policy.
How challenging is it proving to be for Niti Aayog to get states on board on issues which are slightly trickier than most other issues? For instance, rationalization of centrally sponsored schemes and changing the funding pattern of these schemes between center and states. For instance, I know for a fact, and this is not directly related, but an objection was raised in a letter by the Tamil Nadu Chief Minister J.J. Lalitha to the Prime Minister on an HRD ministry proposal, under which it was proposed that the share of centre as far as funding of Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan is concerned could be curtailed. So this is a tricky issue on which states tend to raise objections.
This is in any case a long-standing issue that states always want a larger share of the pie, meaning of the tax revenues. And so this is in this sense not a new thing, but it has acquired perhaps a little more salience lately, because the Planning Commission no longer disperses funds, but instead a much larger part of the tax revenues that the centre raises is now given directly to the states.
From 32% to 42%.
And this was the decision really by or recommendation by the 14th Finance Commission that the share be raised from 32 to 42%. And that of course has meant therefore that part of that some of what the centre used to give in the past as its contribution to the centrally sponsored schemes is now going directly to the states.
Which is why I'm asking you that since Niti Aayog will be working on the basis of consensus, besides giving strategic inputs and technical advice to the states, how difficult will it be to take everyone together, all states together, when it comes to achieving such objectives?
Right. Now, so here the Prime Minister himself actually took the lead, and he has appointed a subgroup of the Chief Ministers. So he really is taking directly the advice from the Chief Ministers as to what do they think on how the shares of the states in the centrally sponsored schemes be determined. Now, clearly, of course, there are bound to be differences between the views that the states might have and what the centre's constraints might be. But this is the way actually the Prime Minister has tried to convey the constraints that the centre faces. Right? So, even when the states or the chief ministers of the states are actually advising, they really cannot advise entirely without consideration of the central government's fiscal constraints. And so this is the way you try to evolve a consensus between the states and the central government.
In the past, Niti Aayog had held a meeting in which non-BJP chief ministers had opposed the land ordinance that was promulgated by the NDA government. You have in the past criticized UPA's land law, but now we are seeing a situation where the centre and the BJP, they are all agreeable to reviving the social impact assessment clause and consent clause that was there in the UPA law. Should this be seen as a compromise, as a surrender on land law?
No. That is not the correct reading. Now, the history of this is that originally, when in the middle of 2014, the central government had consulted the states. Overwhelmingly, the states had said that a revision of the law was required, and this included not just the BJP states but also several non-BJP states. But and that is how the ordinance that actually did the correction to the law came into force. So it was brought under the circumstances under which states themselves had overwhelmingly actually wanted the change. Now, as politics evolved around it, it turned out that many of the opposition parties actually changed their mind and therefore were not willing to support in the upper house the amendment law which was based on the ordinance. And at that point, when the government felt that it lacked the votes to carry the law or carry the amendment to the 2013 law in the upper house, then it decided to withdraw it.
So you won't say that the circumstances forced the centre to let states enact their own land laws?
And so exactly. So now it's not as though the government has changed its minds, but it's simply, the way I put it is that it is changing tracks. The original road on which the central government was traveling, now a lot of obstacles are ahead of it on that road. So it has shifted the roads where the law can be enacted through a different instrumentality.
Now, GST continues to be a political hot potato. In the event of it not being passed, because we've heard it so often that it will be passed in this financial year and in this parliamentary session, and year after year we've seen it getting delayed because of various political reasons. In the event of it not being passed, does the Niti Aayog have an alternative in mind?
No, I'm not pessimistic as you sound. The GST will pass. Look, I mean, this is not a single party's agenda. There is general consensus around it. Its origins go back to the first NDA government under Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee, and then it was taken up by the UPA government, UPA 1 and then UPA 2. It took longer than one would have expected, but nevertheless, various parties have supported it. Now, on the details, there are differences, but some compromise will be reached. I think the law will come into effect. Prime Minister himself has said that he now feels optimistic that we'll be able to implement it in starting April 1, 2016. So, given the long history, there are issues that remain, and of course, issues remain because you're dealing with 29 states and the central government simultaneously. It's a major reform. It requires constitutional amendment, so it's not a minor kind of tweak in the laws, and so you hit roadblocks, but you find ways getting around those roadblocks, and the process is continuing, and I remain quite optimistic actually.
Okay,
the
so
law
you're
will
saying no
come
need
into
for an
force.
alternative. What are the immediate priorities that Niti Aayog is working on? Because I was reading that there are some priority areas that you may have identified: land leasing, land titling, and changes to rules of Right to Education Act, because the private schools are finding it quite difficult to implement.
Well, there are a number of issues on which we are working. Ultimately, our role here is to advise the states what might be ways to make progress, which should help generate growth and therefore also higher incomes, higher wages for the poor. So within that context, with the states, we are discussing issues of land leasing. The land leasing laws were mostly written in the 1950s and 60s when the objectives were different. Land redistribution was the principal objective. That is no longer so now, and the modern context, there may be a case for tweaking the land leasing laws, just as there can be a case made for tweaking the rental laws in the cities. Likewise, our land records are not in great shape, except in some states. Now, Karnataka has, for example, digitized all its records. Haryana and Gujarat are pretty far along that road as well. But in most other states, land records are not in great shape, and the first step has to be to digitize. That's not a controversial issue. That's only a matter of being able to do it, mustering enough resources, enough technical know-how to do it. And then the next third step may turn out to be titling. That's a more difficult thing to do. So that call we would take a bit later, if there are states which actually do want to go ahead and introduce the conclusive titles as opposed to the presumptive titles that exist today. So that's one set of reforms we're talking about. Then one can also, we're beginning to think about reviving some of the reforms related to the marketing of agricultural produce. So that reform had also started actually under Prime Minister
But again, you would
Vajpayee.
need states' support if you want changes
Absolutely.
to the APMC Act.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. This is ultimately states' decisions, and different states may come to different decisions on this. Our job as the think tank of the government, both the central government and the state governments, is to provide advice. In the end, decisions will be those of the states.
You've talked about the priority areas which the Planning Commission is looking at. What would you say are the immediate challenges before the economy that require urgent attention?
There are a number of different areas in which we need to progress, but steady progress is being made. So in a way, the key thing that I have felt, and I've written about it for a long time, is that we need growth to accelerate, but also to become more employment intensive. So, while we did grow from 2003-4 to 11-12 at an average rate of about 8.3%, as a very impressive growth over a 9-year period. But overall, I think our growth has not been so employment intensive. And so if you look at which industries have grown rapidly, these are highly capital intensive industries such as auto parts and automobiles, two-wheelers, machinery sector industries, engineering goods industries, chemicals.
And skill development can play a major role in it, on which
Well,
a
that's
subgroup of chief
certainly
ministers is working.
one area, but also we need to push through reforms. Land acquisition that you just mentioned is important reform. Labor law reforms are important reforms. So what we need is to growth to become more employment intensive, generate well-paid jobs, particularly for those at the bottom of the income distribution. So that's my kind of major objective in a way, that fulcrum on which I sort of think my thinking is pegged on, and therefore the reforms of land laws, labor laws, the APMC as well from that perspective.
All right, so you outlined the challenges before the economy and how Niti Aayog can play a role in addressing them. For now, we'll take a break on Candid Conversation. But today we are in conversation with Dr. Arvind Panagadia, Vice Chairman of Niti Aayog. Welcome back. You're watching Candid Conversation. Today we are in conversation with Dr. Arvind Panagadia, the Vice Chairman of Niti Aayog, and we are talking about various challenges before Niti Aayog, which has replaced the Planning Commission, and challenges before the Indian economy in times of global economic slowdown. Mr. Panagadia, before going into the break, you had referred to labor reforms. Now, this is an area which is a matter of huge debate because India Inc. has a particular view on this and trade unions have another view. We have seen states taking the initiative. For instance, Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh have rolled out labor reforms. How can states be further encouraged to go ahead with labor reform and to ensure that private investment picks up?
So first, I mean, journalists, I know, like to pose this as a sort of a conflict between the corporates or businessmen on the one hand and the workers or unions on the other. But I think thinking has moved quite far actually in the last decade or 15 years or so. Unions also recognize the fact that, growth that we are experiencing is not generating enough jobs, particularly jobs in the organized sector where the unions are present. So they now actually do think in terms of more employment opportunities for the workers in the organized sector. And so I think the atmosphere today is very different than what we saw in the 1980s when, Datta Samant really initiated massive strikes and that, over the decade actually eventually led to the decimation and more or less disappearance of the textiles industry from Bombay and then from Kanpur also. But today I think, employment is seen as an important objective. And so that has made it easier for the states to carry out the reforms. 3 states have already sort of progressed in this direction. Rajasthan started off very well. Then Madhya Pradesh followed suit, and recently Gujarat actually has carried out a series of labor law reforms as well, which are very employment friendly. And so we will see. I'm very optimistic actually that the reforms in these states will begin to now show up in terms of the expansion of industries that employ more workers.
On the state of the economy, Dr. Panagadia, a Fed rate hike is impending. The RBI has cut its repo rate by 50 basis points, and RBI governor says, and also the government, that India is better prepared today than what it was a couple of years ago to deal with a Fed rate hike. How can the impact of a Fed rate hike be minimized, and what role again can Niti Aayog play in that?
No, I think, in the last year we have prepared ourselves a lot better. I think, when the threat of Fed rate hike actually had first appeared in the summer of 2013, we were not as well prepared, but today we are. Our current account deficit is between 1 and 2%. Inflation rate is quite far down, about between 3 and 4%, and growth rate is 7% plus. So we are in good shape, and of course we got a vigilant central bank, and we are also prepared with a very large stock of foreign exchange reserves, which has expanded in the last year or so. And so, if any movements were to happen of investments from India to outside India, if the capital were to move outside India in some volumes, we can handle it. We are prepared for it. We should not be complacent about it. But we also need not feel shaky about it. I think we are on a strong wicket.
As far as the objectives of Planning Commission is concerned, there's a huge note which was prepared by PIB and put out in public domain on what the objectives are and what would be the guiding principle of the Niti Aayog. But beyond what was visualized, do you think that the Niti Aayog needs to look at some more areas?
Well, it's work in progress. I think the document that gave birth to this institution is quite wide-ranging, and so I don't think anything we would want to do would go beyond what is in the document, because the document itself actually defines our mandate quite widely. Now, how it will unfold, that's work in progress. As the needs of the central government change, as the needs of the state governments change, our work program will change. So we'll also have to be a much more flexible institution going forward than perhaps the Planning Commission was. And this also therefore requires us building our own human capital. We are supposed to turn into a think tank, and that of course also requires infusing newer talent, younger analysts.
Has work begun on that?
Yes, we have been in the process. We had advertised for hiring several young professionals, also several officers in special duty, and so that work is in progress. We will need all the talent we can gather.
Since you were in the United States for 40 long years doing something completely different, and you got a new responsibility here, and now your name will go down in history as the first vice chairman of the Niti Aayog. Are you fulfilled with what Niti Aayog has done in the past 9 to 10 months, and are your expectations on track?
No, I'm pleased with what we have been able to do, but you always want to do more than what you are able to do. So, we'd continue to do a better and better job. That is at least the ambition. It's not just enough to be the first vice chairman of the institution, but one has to be a successful vice chairman of the institution. That is far more important than being the first.
Absolutely, and we wish you all the very best. Thank you so much, Dr. Arvind Panagadia, for speaking to us on Candid Conversation.
My pleasure.
With that, we conclude this edition of Candid Conversation. If you have been, thanks for watching.